Shut up and sit down.
The current state of politics is unsustainable, politically, economically.
You still have distrust there.
We all come from very different places.
Man, we don't want the government to do a damn thing.
We deserve better.
People have to have the information in front of them.
It is about supporting, platforming, and assisting the people who are out here actually doing the fight.
There you go. Like, just promote people who are doing something. Volunteer to work with people who you like. And
just take an issue that's important to you and do something.
You are part of that declaration against tyranny.
This conversation gives me a little more hope for the future.
The one, the only
Fight for Liberty. This is the cherry on top.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Fight for Liberty Live. Today, we have an awesome guest for you who I am super excited to bring on up in a few minutes. But first, we're going to talk a little bit about some of our sponsors. First up is Streamlabs Ultra. If you're looking for a way to create high-quality streams of your own that look kind of like the ones that I'm doing, or however you want them to look, you can go on over to Streamlabs Ultra. There's a link in the description below that will save you $9 off your first month or $10 off your first year, depending on how you do it. And then you can have all sorts of fun, creative tools at your disposal to go and make your streams look super great. But if streaming isn't your thing, and maybe business is instead, Craft and Business Services is our newest sponsor, and they are offering a Start Your Business for under $1,000 package. So you get your corp formation, your registered agent, your logo, your collateral, your marketing strategy, and accounting consultation, and everything else that you might need to get your business off the ground, just for $999 plus applicable state theft. So go on over to crafton.us and check them out. But without further ado, we have a great guest today. Gabrielle Cordova is the outreach director for Mike Termott for president, and now she is joining the fight. Welcome to the show, Gabby.
Thank you so much for having me, David.
So I always like to start off with a super introductory question, and I kind of already know the answer to this because I know your parents, but how did you become a libertarian?
Yes, so my parents. No. But no, I like to say, and it is true, my first paycheck. I was, 15 or 16. I actually had to get one of those, my parents had to sign off for me to work. So I might have even been 14, but yeah, that's my story. Really. I got my first paycheck, and my dad, being not only a libertarian, but an actuary. So, accounting, math, finance, all that. I went to him and I said, hey, where are my earnings? I was told I would get this amount. I only see this amount. What's going on? He explained taxes to me, and, they say the rest is history. But not only that, I grew up just in a very political activism family. My dad's dad, my grandfather, was the president of his Democratic club for 30 years. And my mom's mom, my grandma, was the district leader in her district in Brooklyn as a Republican. So family dinners are always very interesting. My mom growing up a little more Republican, my dad growing up a little more Democrat, but the two of them have just since have just leaned more libertarian. So I've kind of just grown up in that household.
Nice.
Yeah.
Were they both born and raised in New York City too still?
Yes. My dad was born and raised in Queens, my mom in Brooklyn. Well, actually, Seaford, Long Island, and then Canarsie, and then Brighton Beach. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I was like, how do you grow up a Republican in Brooklyn?
Yeah.
That's hard to do.
Yeah.
So how did you get into the kind of outreach and publication work that you're doing now?
Sure. Yeah. So, So got my first paycheck. So, go back to there. And then I went to college, and there was a Republican club, a Democratic club, but no libertarian club. And I had actually met someone else who wanted to start a libertarian club. So became really active in college and libertarian club there. This was a Hofstra University. And we had John Stossel on campus. So, it kind of really started there after college. I met my now husband, who is not only a libertarian, but also Jewish. And I was like, yes, let's get married. Yeah, and we found the Queens Libertarians, and they had a meeting at Hooters. We were like, okay, so maybe it's not so serious. Yeah, we weren't really sure what was going on there. But then Larry won ballot access in 2018. And there was a meeting in the Queens chapter at Mike Arcadi's house. He lives in Queens. And I became the secretary. Why not? I can take minutes. I was doing it for my job at the time. I was working for a nonprofit, and I was already taking minutes as a board liaison. So I knew what that was all about. And from there, it kind of just blew up for me. I joined the state committee for Judicial District 11, joined the fundraising committee because, again, it's been my career since college, fundraising. Then became a member at large on the executive committee for Libertarian Party of New York. And then real life hit, the pandemic. And the job that I was working for, the nonprofit company I was working for, when the vaccine mandates were coming out, they changed their policy. And I was told that I'd be required to get vaccinated. And I refused. I said, no, it's my body. I'm willing to take the risk to not get vaccinated. My husband and I want to start a family. I didn't know what any of those risks were. And I felt, you know what? If I get COVID, God willing, I'm healthy and active and young, and hopefully I'll be okay. And so I refused, and they let me go. This was November 2021.
Okay.
And then I got a call from Larry Sharp, who said, hey, I want you to come work on my campaign. I told him basically what was going on and everything. And so he called me, and I started working for him. But that was only for about a month and a half or so, because that December I went to Boston for an LNC meeting. I was volunteering on Tony DeRazio's campaign, his run for chair of the Libertarian National Committee. So I went up to Boston, and I met with Tara DeSisto, who was the development director at the time, because just to meet with her on like a weekly or biweekly basis for advice for the Libertarian Party of New York, since I was on the fundraising committee. And I then heard that there was an opening for a stewardship associate for the LNC. So because I was already meeting with Tara about every week or so, I told her, hey, I told her my circumstance, like, I've been let go of my job, and libertarian's in my blood. It's not only, fundraising is not only a career for me, but being libertarian, it's who I am. So to be able to work for something I'm super passionate about would be awesome. So she said, yeah, interview for it, and that worked out. So I started working for the Libertarian National Committee as a stewardship associate in February of was 2022, so February of last year. And then Tara, my boss, she put in her resignation just a couple of weeks after I was hired. So I reached out to the executive director at the time, Tyler Harris, and I said, hey, look, being a stewardship associate for the LNC is great. I did take a step back a little bit, in my career, because I've just, I've been moving up from a development associate to a board liaison, whatever. And being a development director is really where I'd like my career to go. And he said, well, look, if you've been here a year, absolutely, but I was only there, a month? But he said, go for it. And I did.
There you go.
And I got it. Yeah. Which was really an honor. But I got it just a month before convention. And as we know, Reno, at convention, everything changed. There was a new board, a new leadership. So I stuck through it. I was like, look, I'm going to continue doing my job to the best of my ability. But unfortunately, the executive director resigned. It was just one resignation after another. And then it got to a point where November of this past year came around and they let me go, but hey, I'm in a good place now, so that's good.
There you go. I will say I have a lot of respect for the fact that you're like one of the only people there in those positions that didn't resign and actually like got let go. Like that, I think like deserves respect, because a lot of people were just like assumed that the situation was gonna get shitty and just like gave up instantaneously. And I watched you be like, you know what, let's give it a try. Worst thing that can happen is they fire me, and they did. But like, I feel like you at least gave it your all, where like a lot of the other people that were in those like paid like staff positions during Reno, they all just kind of threw their hands up and rage quit.
Oh yeah. I mean, well, for me, like again, like being a development director, like that's something they can never take away from me. It's on my resume now. So whatever job I have next, wherever my career leads, I have that. And yeah, they would have to rip it out of my hands. Again, being a development director, something that's been my career since college, and working for the Libertarian Party it was icing on the cake. And I was like, yeah, you got to rip this from my hands for me to go anywhere. And they did, but I continue on, and I keep working for the cause. So
that's awesome. I'm very encouraged to see a lot more of my friends turn these types of volunteer like things that they've been doing for a decade or close to it into like actual careers and stuff. I give like Kelsey Lyon a lot of shout outs for the fact that she's able to like make a full business and a successful career out of the things that she's also doing for campaigns and nonprofits and other things that she can do both, and she's doing it very well. And I like to see more and more of my friends doing that. And like when you started getting like actual paid jobs in the movement, I was like, yay, more people. Like, because I hate watching good people, like really good people, get burnt out by the fact that like their careers are because they're good at what they do, their careers are taking off and they don't have time to put in the same volunteer effort that they did, or kids are getting a little bit older, or also just a decade of doing stuff for no pay and no gratitude kind of wears on somebody. Like so many people get burnt out because they're not able to put what they're passionate about into like a long-term goal like you were with your career.
Yeah, for sure. And then so I was let go this past November from the LNC the day after Mike Termott, who I actually met in Reno, and very supportive of his run because I knew he was jumping right in. So now it's a year later, and he's still very serious about his campaign. So I met him a year ago, and of course I couldn't take any sides working for the LNC. I introduced myself. I went to his table. I said, okay, I'll hear you out, but I couldn't, have an opinion or anything.
Mm-hmm.
But the day after I was let go from the LNC, he called me and he said, what do I have to do to get you on my campaign? And again, rest is history.
Nice.
So, yeah.
So how do you normally kind of start out that relationship with a campaign or a client, then kind of figure out how you want to promote them and do the thing? How do you like kind of find that voice that you're then projecting for them?
Sure. Yeah. Just getting an idea of what they stand for, what their values are, what their number one issues are. Just having a conversation. Really, a lot of what being a fundraiser is, or doing PR, any of that is listening. Just listen to whoever it is you're working with or talking to. Just listen, hear them out, get an idea of what their passions are and what's important to them, and use that. Use that in a PR pitch, use that in a fundraising pitch, and that's really what it's
I like it.
Yeah.
Listening is definitely something that not too many people are very good at.
Especially libertarians.
Right. I feel like part of that has to do with the fact that we've spent so long like not being listened to at all that we don't really know what it looks like. And you know,
It's true. Yeah.
we have that kind of stereotype of being like social outcasts and whatnot, that like a lot of people in the movement just didn't have the experience of having like real conversations with people and building like real human connections ever. And then they're thrust into some position like a county vice chair where it's like, oh, hey, be good at peopling.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, exactly.
what?
Yep.
I became an events director 2 weeks into being a member of LP New York, and I'm like, I've never planned an event before in my entire life. The biggest event I've ever planned has been birthday parties for myself where like 6 people show up out of the 20 I invite. Like, I am not good at this. This is not something I've had a history with. But, you know, we like to throw people into the deep end and hope that they can swim. And I don't know, I guess some of us do, and, you know, end up working out okay, but we do a lot of damage in the interim while people are kind of figuring out how to do it.
Yeah, no, for sure. And you know, it's interesting. I think my upbringing plays a huge role in the positions that I've held, and the positions that I have, the position that I have today as an outreach director. So besides being libertarians and, you know, my dad being an actuary, very logical thinking, I think that's where, you know, and a lot of libertarians are very logical, not so much emotional thinkers. And my mom, though, she's a social worker, so she is very, you know, being empathetic and working with people. So I have that balance, which I think has been so helpful with, you know, just again, being libertarian but also being, you know, being that people person at the same time. So, you know, I'm not a huge reader. Like I have picked up Revolution, my Ron Paul, but I did that for my poli-sci class. I wrote a paper on it.
Nice.
So yeah, again, in college. Yeah. My professor loved that, by the way, which I was really excited about. Yeah, so having that balance, I think, is super helpful. There are a lot of people who they've just read the books and that's it. Like that's where it stops there, and they have that tunnel vision. And it's important to hear people out and meet them where they are. So if they have an issue that's really important to them, it's hearing them out and saying, okay, well, you know, I know there's this issue that you have, you know, in politics, and you want it solved. Let's figure out a way to solve it the libertarian way. Right. Versus, you know, Democrat Republican way, or so.
Yeah, I like that kind of, you know, two sides of the coin thing that you're bringing up here. I also find it fairly interesting and like very counter to the stereotypes that you would hear, that your left brought up dad became the logical thinker and your like right wing brought up mom became the social worker. Like that's kind of backwards. I
know.
But kind of neat. And I feel like I very similarly, my mom is the money math person in the family, but she's still the people person. My dad's a computer programmer that if he could have put like an iron bar on his office door to where nobody could come in and bother him, he would have done that many years ago. Yeah. So my dad was definitely the one that raised me to like, you know, you don't involve the government unless you have to, was kind of the thing. Like, you respect the police, you respect the IRS, you respect those people, and you do the things that they tell you to do because otherwise they kill you. But you do as little with them as you possibly can. That was basically how I was raised. Like, pay your taxes like a good little boy, but like as little as possible.
Right.
And then I just took it a step further to, how about I don't pay my taxes? You know? But that's a little too much Dan Berman in my life, I guess.
Yeah, that's great though.
So take me through like kind of an average week with Mike. Like, what kind of things are you actually helping him with?
Sure. Yeah. So, well, we have our weekly meetings on Mondays. Monday's usually my, you know, catch up on emails. What am I going to be getting done this week? Usually I would say 9 to middle of the afternoon time, I'm reaching out to media, podcasters, I've compiled these lists just over the years, working on different campaigns and my own contacts and just finding people on Twitter and hearing about them. And so reaching out. And then afternoons, evenings, that's when I make the fundraising calls. And actually, I find, and this is just great advice for anyone, Thursday, Fridays in the early evenings, that's when people pick up their phone. And also are a little more willing to give because they've kind of figured out, okay, I've paid whatever off during the week. I know what my budget is at this point. I'm going into the weekend. I'm a little more giving now. So, so I mean, that's really it. It's, I try to split up my days as balanced as possible because it's a lot. I'm doing a little fundraising. I'm doing a little PR, which is, media outreach, podcast outreach. It's a little bit of everything, trying to get Mike meetings, if he's going to a convention, seeing who we can meet with, and reaching out to local media in those areas. So yeah, it's a little bit of everything.
I like it. I feel like almost everything that you just said, some people that don't know that you exist would just assume that Mike was doing it.
Yeah.
Like as far as like, because they're all somewhat within the candidate's scope, and especially if you've only worked on like LP campaigns where there isn't a solid team, like fundraising is almost entirely done by the candidate, and same with like the PR and like outreach. Like you are the only not candidate as far as for the presidential debate that we're doing on the 30th. You're the only person that's not the candidate that I'm talking to for that. Like everyone else I'm talking directly to the candidate, not a manager or anything like that. So I think in my experience, it enables the candidate to look more like superhuman if they have an actually good team behind them. And like I got a lot of questions like when I worked for Tulsi Gabbard, was like, how is she doing all of this? And it's like, she's not. She's just showing up and talking. She just has the same 45-minute speech rehearse that she gives 6 times a day, and that's literally all she does. We do the rest of it. Like her like scheduling person is one of the most hands-on people I've ever worked with. Like you could not sneak anything past her at all, and like Tulsi wouldn't let you. Like she was one of the most principled, like, I'm not even going to talk to you about my schedule. I don't know what I'm doing in 2 hours. Talk to my it's actually her like mother-in-law was the person in that job, is like, talk to my mother-in-law. Like I don't know. And it was great because I've worked with so many candidates who will answer those questions even though they don't know the answer, and then I get like double booked people and stuff like that. It's nice to have like an actual breakdown of the duties to where the candidate can focus on just talking. I think it was Danny Lundy I had on the show like 2 or 3 weeks ago, and he's a campaign manager and was talking about how the candidates' only jobs should be asking for votes and asking for money, and that's it. Like if they're doing anything beyond that, the campaign manager is not doing their job right.
And this is something that our team has talked to Mike about, but really this is advice for any candidate. You can easily sell your campaign team because they're the ones behind the scenes doing the work, but in the end you've got to sell yourself. People aren't going to donate to you because you've got it. Oh, maybe they will donate to you because you have a great campaign. Like maybe people will donate to Mike because I'm on his team. I don't know. But in the end, you donate because you believe in the candidate. You believe in that front-facing person. So, yeah.
He's definitely going to fare well in the debate, because one of the things that I want to talk about is kind of that like preparedness, because I know a lot of people it's not going to be about like the who should I vote for. It's like, who should I volunteer for is kind of the answer the question I'm trying to answer with it, because it's like, who has their shit together enough to where me giving 10 hours a week is actually going to go somewhere, instead of just like floundering in planning meetings and hoping that maybe I get a random task here or there, because there's no hierarchy set up. There's no way to actually like bring in volunteers. I've worked on way too many campaigns where they're like asking for volunteers on social media constantly, and then I sign up and then no one reaches out at all. They just don't even have somebody whose job it is to reach out to the candidate or to new volunteers.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's great. I think it's important that candidates have a way for people to volunteer or can answer those questions of like, hey, I want to work in your campaign, but I don't even know where to start. Like, so I think that I think that's really great that you're gonna be having that not so I guess it won't be so much a debate, more of a let's have a conversation on how to get people on your team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely want to go more like forum style, because I'm not a good debate moderator necessarily, like especially not a multi-person like that. I can keep 2 people at bay, but like there's gonna be 5, I think, because it's not even just LP. I have an independent and a Republican coming as well.
Nice.
So it'll be kind of fun.
Sure.
But enough about that. That's I definitely want to talk about like how campaigns can better find people like you to help them out and like break out those jobs that you do, because I feel like for a candidate to let go of some of that can be very difficult, especially if they don't have like a campaign manager in the middle saying like you have to let go of these and like are giving tasks to somebody else. So like how would you suggest a candidate like reach out to somebody and ask for help on, say, like the booking and kind of scheduling management side of things?
Well, so you kind of answered the question. You mentioned a campaign manager or like someone or some sort of a campaign director, and I think that's a good start. It could just be someone you trust, someone you're close to. When I was working on Tony DeRosa's campaign, and I kind of ended up becoming his campaign manager just because we were good friends. We were on the executive committee together of LPNY. So it kind of just went from there. It's like, okay, who do we know who's good at setting up events, good at PR? So I think it's just finding people who you know, finding people you trust, someone you trust with your calendar, scheduling those events, someone you trust, making those phone calls on your behalf. And I think it's just finding people within your network, having that conversation, and then seeing who they know, who has certain skill sets, and kind of going from there.
I like it. Yeah, I think trust is a really important piece of that. Not a whole lot of there's not a whole lot of in the movement all the time. And it's because it really, to be good at the job, you have to have like their whole schedule. Because I actually just had a thing yesterday where I booked somebody for something, and then now I'm gonna have to figure out how to get the other guests to like rebook it, because there was a doctor's appointment there that wasn't on the like official calendar, because they're they don't need to know where I'm going to the doctor or whatever, but like you need this person to know every movement you're going to make for the next 9 months. And it's kind of a hurdle. So you'd have to be able to trust them and know that they're not gonna screw you over or give you too much or give you not enough. And that's another like balance you have to weigh, because I know a lot of people that if they can go from one interview to another, they'll prefer that. If they never have to like step out of interview mode, they can do 3-4 hours worth of interviews back to back to back to back. And if you give them 5 minutes in between those interviews, they're gonna like sit down and like crack a beer or something like that, or smoke a joint, and like completely get out of the mode, and that next interview is going to be terrible. And then other people, it's like, I need an hour to cool down and prep for the next one, because it's going to be different questions and it's a different person I have to get, like, and you have to figure that out. But like from each campaign you work on, you have to figure out like, is this one of those people or one of these people? And it's a struggle for sure.
Yeah, but it's something you learn over time. Working for Mike versus working for Larry, it's you kind of you accommodate for them, you adjust, based on what they like. Mike liked to write down his calendar. I was like, no, we need like we need a digital calendar. And I like to write everything down. We need something we can put everything on. And with Larry, it was like, yeah, here's my calendar, and just have everything on there. So it's just learning what their likes and dislikes are, and getting behind that, and just being flexible. That's really it. I was gonna comment on something else you mentioned. Maybe it'll come back to me.
I want to ask you specifically about that calendar, because I have struggled in the past to try to get somebody from a physical calendar to a digital one. And like even myself personally, while I'm having those arguments, I still have a physical calendar for myself. So like, I get it. There's something about like, it's the same as like taking notes, I think, where it's like something about like writing it down, like solidifies it in my head a lot better.
Totally. You'll remember it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So how did you get him to switch over, and was that like a big struggle or just a couple of conversations?
No, it was just a couple of conversations. I told him, look, you know, I hate having to like text you or call you every single time I want to schedule. And now, you know, things are picking up. We're doing like 2-3 podcasts a week, and it'd be easier if we had something digital. And we're like, oh, all right, you know. Yeah, no, we were able to get something that works for the whole team, and it's important either way to keep communication open. Like, I'll still text him and be like, hey, I scheduled this. I'll email it to him and I'll put on his calendar just to make sure that like everything's on the same page. And that's also like high priority. Be organized. And it does help that it's something that I, you know, again, having an actuary father, having ledgers, you know, from the bank and things like that. I still do it. I don't use any of those like Mint apps or whatever. I write everything down.
Nice.
And like you, I also have a physical calendar. I have one because I went with my cousin to like Five Below or something, and I found a cute one, and I was like, all right, fine, I'll do it this year. But next year I probably won't, and maybe the year after I will. Who knows? But yeah, just keeping everything in one place, being organized, and yeah, eventually you say, look, we got to do something that works for everyone on the team, and yeah, eventually you'll get them there.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, being organized is a struggle, and I think just like to the audience real quick, like if you know whether or not you're organized, you might be able to present as organized to other people, but you know whether or not you're doing the like fake it till you make it kind of thing, or if you're actually somebody that is on top of those types of things. And do not take a campaign position where you have to be organized if you know that you can't. Like if you're just barely keeping your current daily schedule together and like yourself together, you can't keep a candidate together. So like if you watched the episode a couple weeks ago with Danny and you heard him say that and you're like, oh, that instantly disqualifies me, this is your loophole. You bring on somebody else who actually is organized, and if you could do the rest of the campaign manager stuff, you've got the ideas behind everything and you've got the people skills, that's great. Just make sure you have backup. There's got to be somebody on the team that is going to actually make sure that the trains run on time.
Yeah, I don't know, absolutely. Yeah, I find candidates are the most unorganized. Like they are good, you know, they're good speakers, they're good, you know, getting out there and talking to people, but they are not organized. So yes, it's important they have an organized team of organized people.
Yeah, I was the deputy campaign manager for Stacey Pressman for mayor of New York City, and I would not have gotten anything done like was done if I didn't have Artie Sintef as a second deputy campaign manager. Him and I worked very well together because he is a trains run on time person and I know that I am not. And we got brought on pretty much at the same time, and we had that conversation very early on, and he was like, okay, no tasks go in your bucket that have to do with keeping things organized. None. Yeah. So I was just like the fireman who was running around doing whatever happened to pop up, because that was stressful to him. He couldn't like derail his whole day to put out a fire because then the trains wouldn't run on time. So it was a great kind of division of labor. But like, yeah, you have to make sure that there's somebody there, because like Paul Grindle was the actual campaign manager. Love the guy, but he's also not organized. Like we needed somebody, and Artie was the man for sure.
There you go. Yeah, no, absolutely. It's so important. So yeah, if it's not, you know, if it's not the candidate running those meetings, you know, going through the list of to-dos, it's the campaign manager, the campaign director. You know, it's very important to have someone who's keeping everything on track, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Otherwise, way too many things slip through the cracks, and you don't realize how many things there are to slip through the cracks until they're doing it. And it's like, oh wait, there's like all of this stuff going on.
For sure.
How do you find like media things for Mike to do?
So a list was compiled before I started. He had someone else on the team compile a list of just, I think he searched keywords, libertarian keywords, and pulled up articles, people who had written articles, whether they mentioned libertarian or any of those keywords. So I have a whole list that I go through from different states. I have that Google alert going. So if I see an article comes out and Mike's name is mentioned, I'll reach out to that author and say, hey, would you like to do a feature on him? So it's keeping an eye out for everything and anything that could pop up, and then reaching out to those reporters and saying, hey, he'll be in this state this weekend, or we'd love to do a feature on him. Would you like to interview him? Yeah.
How what's like your batting average there? How often do you get like positive responses?
So it's tough because it's still early. Elections aren't really on, the national news's mind. It's not really the narrative right now. However, things like police brutality, the banks and financial system, things like that do pop up in the news and are on people's minds. I'll reach out to news media and say, hey, I have a candidate here who's an economist who, worked in the police force. Would you like to interview him? And sometimes, yeah, there'll be people like, yeah, I want to interview him just because he has that experience, not necessarily because he's running for, the presidential nomination in 2024. But again, because it's, being a libertarian, though, you're not going to get too many media outlets who want to be like, yeah, I'll interview a libertarian, but you will get a few here and there who want to interview him just because he has that background, that experience. So my batting average, though, I don't know. Again, it's still early. I will say, though, as far as podcasts go, libertarian podcasts, I think more and more people who are seeing him on Larry's forum and seeing him out there at conventions are going, yeah, we want him, we want to interview him. So I think within the libertarian sphere, things are going really well. We're in a good place, and I think it can only grow from here. Obviously, there are people who are still waiting. They're still waiting for their guy, and whoever that is. But we'll see. Really, time will tell. But for now, we keep pushing. And again, Mike is extremely serious, and we're gonna take it all the way to next year, which I cannot believe we're already a year out from a convention next year. But, there and on.
This one's snuck up on me. Like,
yeah.
I can't believe it's already mid-May. It doesn't
sound
right at all. I'm like seeing things pop up in my like last year's memories that I'm like, that was just a couple months ago. What do you mean?
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
I like that I love that you brought up the like other things besides him being a candidate that can get him media, because I think that's one of the things that I look for in a candidate if I'm deciding whether or not I'm going to work for them, is like, do you have relevant experience somewhere? Because like even like Chase has some good solid relevant experience with like running like transportation companies, and some of the other work that he's done in the past. He's had to kind of do things in a very similar to like an executive position job, but not quite as like catchy as like, oh, a cop that's going to talk about police brutality. There's like certain things that you can tell beforehand that like this might actually be able to get you some media attention above and beyond the fact that you're just running for a race that no one wants you to win. Because once it actually matters that he's running for president, if he actually becomes like successful at all and like a real threat to Biden and Trump, he's not going to get that media anymore. So you have to know that like they're not really going to get media for being a candidate. How are they actually going to be able to get media? And I think you hit the nail on the head there.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, like I said, we'll see what happens. Chase is a great team. Mike is a great team. I love, I call my coworkers, my colleagues. I really enjoy our weekly meetings because working remote, this is a chance for me to see other people. I do get opportunities around here, and now, my husband and I live in Tampa, Florida. We reaffiliated Hillsborough County. So, and of course I'm secretary and Eric is vice chair. But you know, we get to see other libertarians, other faces, but it's always nice to just, you know, be in the sphere and see other people.
Some things change and some things stay the same, huh?
Yeah, right. Like...
New state, new county, same positions. I love it.
Same thing. I know. I was like, well, I've been doing this before, so, you know, do it again. Why not?
I used to pick on my mom a lot growing up because she was the treasurer for pretty much every single thing that we did. Like, she was the treasurer for the women's program at the church. She was the treasurer for my Boy Scout troop, my sister's Girl Scout troop, like the Wednesday night program, like everything. Her like AOL username, when that was still a thing, was like treasurer for all, because like she was just like everything's treasurer. It's like,
yeah.
And now I've talked to her a couple times about possibly being like a campaign treasurer, and she's like, nah.
Yeah. Oh gosh, those filings. Yeah, no.
I think the like I might be able to convince her if I find like a local like town board race where there's no state or higher like bureaucracies to deal with. But I don't know, the FEC is not the worst. I feel like some states have a lot harder time running for like state house or state senate than they would for Congress, because the FEC at least is like works in like off of 1990s computer technology instead of like zero computer technology.
Right.
I think there's still some states where you have to do like physical, like written, like forms that you need to submit like hard copies of forms to the.
Oh gosh.
No thanks.
Oh man, no. And you know, one of my close friends, Laura Newell, she is treasurer of the Libertarian Party of New York, and she would just, you know, share all her grievances with me. And of course now Cody Anderson has taken it over, but you know, it's like if you know it, you do. He did, yeah, I believe, yeah, he's the yeah. This was their election, you know, this past year, which of course, you know, we knew we were moving, so we didn't jump back onto the board, but yeah, I mean, it's not easy. It's not fun.
Yeah. I do not envy any of those people. There's a reason that I resigned from the state committee and have not sought higher office within it. It's like, no, that's been my like message to a lot of people that like want to do activism and they think that politics is the only version of activism, and it's like, no, you can do so many other things that involve so much less paperwork. Like, like if you don't want to do the paperwork, don't get into politics. Like, just start. Like a 501c3 is less paperwork than a campaign is. Like,
gosh. Yeah. No, I mean, there's animal shelter. That's something, you know, something else I grew up, and I think that kind of threw me into the nonprofit world too. Is I grew up, you know, volunteering in animal shelters and doing just a lot of volunteer work. My grandma, who was actually the Republican of her district, the district leader, she would go to houses and teach, you know, disabled children, and like she would do it for like, you know, and she was retired at the time, so it was either volunteer or you know, low pay, but she would do it just out of the kindness of her heart. And I think that kind of got me into like nonprofit too. Is like, what can I be passionate about? I mean, what am I passionate about that I can, you know, fundraise? And yeah.
That's awesome. There's like so many of those like corny quotes about like, you know, do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. And I don't agree with those quotes at all, because you still have to work. Even if you're super passionate about it, there are days that you don't want to work and it still feels like work. And there's like no job is entirely fun. But if you can at least go home and say like, I made the world a better place today by doing it, instead of like, I made Walmart some extra money today, like it's a much better feeling at the end of the day.
Hey, I have some really nice conversations with them. So they have people who bag, okay, this is a little bit of Florida speaking, but they have people who bag your groceries at Publix, and I know this is not existent in New York anymore.
Nope.
But I have some really nice conversations with them, and I'm like, you know, thank you and they don't take tips, you know, so but you know, you never know who you'll meet. But I think it's true. I mean, you can find the passion in any work you do if, you know, you really do love what you do. But there are times where it can be frustrating, or, you know, you're like, oh, I really have to do this again tomorrow, you know. But I think there's a little bit of truth in it, but I do agree that there are some times where like, yeah, you're not gonna love it, and that's okay. You know?
Yeah, I think too much of our generation kind of got sold on the idea that like there was a possibility of living an adult life where you didn't like hate anything.
Yeah.
And you were just like happy all of the time because you got that degree that you wanted and that job that you wanted and you make six figures and you're just good. And I don't know anyone that grew up to live that life. Like, not a single person is like, yeah, no, my job is great. My boss is a super awesome human that just like appreciates me, and I feel like I'm paid enough. And like my wife is like always like super encouraging, and like my kids are super well behaved, and like it's not a real life.
No, no, it's not. No, it's true. Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about the fundraising that you've been doing, not just for Mike, but I'm kind of like broadly through the whole career. How have you found actually, I guess my main question is, have you found that raising lots of small donations or a few large donations has netted you more donations in the long run?
So definitely the monthly, because and this is actually conversations that I have with Larry Sharp a lot, and he has that sales background. So this is something that I've learned just in my career in fundraising, but also talking to Larry, is that those small donations monthly, they add up. And someone who's giving $5 a month, that's a cup of coffee that they're not missing. So, and again, I feel like I just quoted Larry there, but it's true. Someone who's giving $15, $25 a month, and they're giving and they just kind of forgotten about it. That's going to make more of an impact than someone who gives, let's say, $5,000 one time and will never give again. So definitely those monthly donations, they do make more of an impact. If you're able to get, that maximum, individual contribution limit from an individual for a year, then that's great. The more of those, the better. But it is easier trying to get that monthly commitment, someone to give monthly, and yeah, it does make an impact longer.
Awesome. Yeah. I've heard a kind of a very long debate about the kind of two different. I mean, I think you end up having to do both and to be a good candidate. But I've talked to some candidates that are, I've like interviewed for like a fundraising position, and they're talking about like, I want to plan events and all these things, and like the only things in their head are like whales, and like they just want to go whale hunting for fundraising, and it's like I don't know if that's a good strategy. But I've also seen way too many libertarian campaigns fail because there wasn't a single whale in their fundraising pocket, and all they're doing is milking a bunch of extremely broke libertarians for that like couple bucks a month that they can give, and then they fall on hard times and start canceling donations, and then you have nowhere to go from there. So I've seen both sides of it end up kind of being true, and I've heard a lot of people argue about whether or not like one strategy over the other. But I do think that the smaller donations can be looked down on a lot, and there's plenty of campaigns that have shown that you could do a lot with that. Like even Bernie Sanders, like I think, like his average donation was in the like somewhere in the mid-20s, something like that, for his 2020 race, and like he raised millions of dollars still with that average donation staying as low as it was. Sure.
Yeah. No, you want to find a good balance between those who are able to give monthly, and then those heavy hitters who are able to give you, the limit, or or more than that minimum donation a month. So for sure, yeah. And Bernie, I mean, and actually my sister was probably one of those people who's giving him monthly a lot. Yeah, but a lot of like the college kids, kids who it's $5 a month is nothing, 5, 10, 15. But you can do a lot with that if you have a lot of people willing to give, even just that much a month. It really does make an impact. But like I said, you do want to find a balance. You do want to find some of those people who are willing to give more, and people who are willing to give less. But monthly.
Yeah. How do you think we can bring more whales into the liberty movement?
Ooh, that is a good question. Gosh, I think I'm going to go back to what I mentioned before. Listening, finding their issue, the issue that they care about, and hear them out and say, well, this is how the Libertarian Party can solve that problem. And we have, some big names out there. We've got our Justin Amash, our Larry Sharp, and just, let them know that there are people out there fighting the fight, right? And this is how they would solve the problem that you're passionate about, that you care about. Give me an issue and let's talk about it. Candidates they've given to, and it all starts with a phone call, and I've said this a few times, and especially these days, because I'm hearing a lot of things about data and database issues, and that being the reason that people can't fundraise. And in the end, data doesn't fundraise, people fundraise. So it's all about just picking up the phone, having a conversation, listening, talking about issues that matter to whoever it is you're talking to. And if they can't think of an issue, bring up an issue, say, well, what about inflation? And have a conversation. And, a lot of people, they're libertarian and they don't realize it, or there's just something that, there's some way they think about a certain topic or certain issue that's libertarian, and they just don't know it yet.
Yeah.
So, there is a way to pull out of them just by having that conversation.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that the liberty movement does wrong is that we have a kind of like all or nothing approach to a lot of it. Like you're either a libertarian or you're not. And we don't give a lot of wiggle room for those people that are maybe just libertarian on a single issue, and that is it. And they are terrible, awful, neocon Nazi statists on everything else. But if you're going to give me a $5,000 donation to help us end the war on drugs, then let's go. And there really isn't a lot of space for people like that. We don't have like the single issue like nonprofits that the Democratic and Republican parties do. We don't have like we have a couple of gun organizations, but that's about the only issue that we have like some really solid things. And there's like Normal and a couple of other like of these things, but they've kind of gotten taken over by the duopoly and become stagnant, kind of like the NRA and like other organizations like that, and they just kind of funnel into the duopoly. We don't really have a lot of ways for people to give outside of campaigns, and even that, it's like I might not support your campaign, or I don't want to throw away money to a losing candidate. And the only way that Mike Termont helps end the war on drugs is if he actually wins the presidency at this point, where if there was an organization in his area that he was working on to like go where he was going from police precinct to police precinct, talking to people about like why they should just look the other way and not prosecute and not arrest people for this kind of thing. Like that would be something, not to criticize Mike's run for president at all, but like there's like a window there for like single issue stuff that we just don't do at all. And then we'll take even like I'm gonna space on the dude's first name, something Penn, the like comedian that was kind of libertarian there for a while.
Yeah. What, like the Penn and Teller guys?
Yeah.
But the Penn, but yeah.
Like he was a libertarian and called himself a libertarian and like a big L libertarian for a while, and now he isn't anymore. And I'm not really sure what happened, but that was probably somebody that could have been brought into the movement a little bit stronger, given a couple of like speaking spots at conventions, and like made enough friends and like connections to actually keep him in a movement, but instead was just somebody that kind of ideologically agreed with us on a couple of issues for a few years and said that on Bill Maher a few times, and that was all he really did for the movement in the long run. Same with like wow, I'm really spacing on names right now. The like Hispanic dude from Grown Ups, who's like he's tweeting about like the Mises Institute constantly, but I've never seen him like at an event or endorse anybody or like really do anything like that. I don't know. I would love to bring those kind of people in further, and I just don't know how.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And they're out there. You know, I have a list that goes back to, gosh, maybe 10 years ago now at this point, of just people who have expressed some sort of interest in the Libertarian Party. And these are people like Raven Simone, Melissa Joan Hart. At some point or another, they mentioned an interest or that they were Libertarian. And I just compiled this list because, well, when I became secretary of the Libertarian Party of Queens, I was like, hey, maybe we'll have some of these guys on as speakers or, you know, whatever. But I think that was really around like the presidential years where people felt comfortable kind of siding with, you know, a third party. We might see that again next year. You know, you never know. People come out of nowhere and go, hey, you know, I think Kanye West at one point mentioned, like, you know, I don't even know, but you know, you really never know. And again, it could be just a single issue, you know, and if someone's out there, you know, promoting their values and their issues and solving in a libertarian way, and someone goes, oh wow, I never thought of it like that, but it makes a lot of sense, they're hooked, and you got them, and you know, and they'll back that candidate and that person till the end. So you know, you never know.
People are a lot more loyal than I think most people expect them to be, and it's once you have them hooked, they'll stick around for a lot longer. But we don't like really hook people in, and one of the best ways that we hook people in is like with personal drama, which works like subjectively, like in for what we're talking about, because like people stick around because they have friends, and we're small enough of like a social circle to where that works. But it won't work for long, and it doesn't work for very many people, and it takes you a little while to really get into that circle, and you have to be like somebody that actually likes people, which is not necessarily our target demographic either.
Yeah, no, it's true.
Yeah, I think even like John Stossel kind of bothers me a little bit, just the fact that he is like so libertarian and has been for so long, and has been all but like ostracized by the party and the movement because nobody, like, he was on Fox News for too long and everybody just said like, he's just one of them. And like, I don't know, he should have a position within like LP Manhattan, if you ask me. Like, he should be at those meetings. Like, why isn't he coming? Like, we could probably hook him if only somebody knew his like executive assistant or something.
I know. Yeah, I mean, my view has always been, you can be as Democrat or Republican as you want, as long as you don't force your beliefs on me. And that's that's how I am as a libertarian. But you will have some people who are like, no, if you weren't born libertarian, or you didn't read, you know, Rothbard or whatever, you're not libertarian enough. And it's like, no, you know, I think that something that's so great about our party is that, you know, we're open to everyone and anyone, and at least, you know, we should be. But that's, you know, my view.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I was brought into the party. I was probably, I'd say like 60% libertarian when I first joined the party, but I only got brought in on 2 issues. Like, Gary Johnson was the only candidate that offered both guns and drugs.
There you go.
That's all it took for me to join the party. I still was not like pro border wall. Like, I thought that was dumb, but I was still like somewhat pro, like I was still a nationalist, let me put it that way, when I joined the party. Like, I was still a like American supremacist, for lack of a better word, of like, you know, we're the greatest country in the world and our founding fathers are the greatest thing ever. And like, I joined the LP as like this is the culmination of true patriotic American politics, is the LP. And then fast forward like 5 years and I'm like, the Constitution is unconstitutional in and of itself and a violation to the Articles of Confederation. And like, George Washington was a tyrant, and like a whole lot of learning since then. But like, But yeah, we have to be able to like bring those people in. And like I mentioned, like I was given party positions. I was like my county contact up here in Oswego County. And then when I moved to the city, I was given instantly a job in the Manhattan Party, still as a nationalist, still as like I thought we should have decidedly won the Korean War and like nuked China, because like then the like Vietnam wouldn't have happened and we wouldn't be having all these other problems. Like I still had all of those terrible neocon opinions while I was running for New York City Council as a libertarian. And or like just before that, like a lot of those got broken down in the months that I was running in the primary for public advocate against Devin Falcon. Like debating Devin actually like broke me down a lot into like admitting that I wasn't a good libertarian yet. And like not the public debates, but him and I had a lot of like private arguments like at the Brooklyn meetings and stuff like that, where he was like, no, like freedom of movement is important and like open borders is libertarianism. And I'm like, huh, okay. That's...
You're like, oh shit. Okay.
But yeah, I don't know. I think that something that candidates have a unique ability to do is in kind of the like the media stuff that we were talking about earlier. When you cast as wide of a net as you are talking about casting, you have that ability to maybe find out that there's some journalists that are libertarians and just don't know it yet.
Yeah.
And the people reading those things who are not listening to anything from any of the rest of us, but they read this one blogger or whatever that you happen to be able to get in on. Like I think candidates talk to libertarians too much. and doing the not that is how we actually get more libertarians.
Well, which I get too, though. I mean, especially, you know, next year being convention and, you know, you want to make good with the delegates. And this is something that we're constantly talking about in our campaign. And, you know, I think really any candidate should be talking about within their campaign is, you know, are we focusing on just who the delegates might be because it's important to win the nomination? You know, should we be talking to only libertarians? Should we only be on, you know, the libertarian podcast or whatever? Or should we be reaching out to the wider audience so that, you know, once we do win the nomination, our message is out there and people know who we are? So I think it's important that there be a good balance. This way, you know, you're ready to hit the ground running once that nomination is won. You know, once if you do, you know, when you do get elected, and not just, you know, in a presidential campaign, but any campaign, you know, if it's a super local election and we do have libertarians out there who have been elected, you know, it's making sure people really know who you are and what you stand for. And that's really important.
Yeah.
You
I think this far out from convention, you still have the ability to talk to a non-libertarian, make them a libertarian, have them join the party, and then be a delegate. Like we're still far enough out from convention to where that's a logical timeline. So I feel like most campaigns that I've seen, and not just this year, but like most years, they start off talking to libertarians and then start to branch out to a wider audience. And it almost makes more sense to do it vice versa. The last 3 months before convention, sure, just talk to the people who are the delegates because most of them are already decided by then. And like, you know, you need that nomination. But before that, you can go almost like Mises takeover style and be like, join the party, become a delegate, and then vote for me. And win it that way possibly. And I feel like if there was a giant influx, like even just let's say in New York, for example, if we noticed 10 new members that all joined because Mike's campaign brought them into the party, me as a likely delegate to DC from New York is going to see that, and my vote for Mike is going to be fairly highly likely at that point, because like I've never had somebody join the party this far out from an election saying that they were brought in by a candidate. It's always like post the general election that stuff actually happens. So like if I saw any candidate actually actively bringing people in, I'd be like, okay, awesome, this is our guy. So it's kind of like has a two-pronged approach if you do it right.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And yeah, you really never know, but that's a huge plus. Yeah, absolutely. If you're in New York and you're like, who are these people like that? And how did you join the party? Oh, I spoke to Mike Maat or whomever, and they spoke to me about this issue, and it really hit me. It really got to me that this could be solved in a libertarian way, and here I am. I go, oh wow, it goes to show that that candidate is really influential and can make an impact even outside the libertarian, our little sphere. So,
yeah, because at the end of the day, like we still only make up 2-3% of the voting population. I love all of those, like, most people are libertarians and just don't know it yet kind of rhetoric, but like most people that vote are not. Like most people that vote are decidedly in a party. Yep. And those people, you have to be able to get to like actually break off, and that's a whole different argument than just being like, I'm better than this guy. It's like you need to abandon your family, your upbringing, your entire like worldview, and go do this other thing. That's a hurdle for people.
Yeah.
I was lucky to be brought up in like an independent house where it's like we don't vote based on party. We vote like based on like I've never seen my parents vote for somebody that wasn't on the Republican line, but I've also never seen them vote for, well, until I joined the party. Like they voted like Johnson and Joe and Larry, but everybody else has been the Republican, but they'll check the box on the conservative or independence line.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of how I was brought up. It's like that, like we're decidedly right-wing conservatives, but we're not Republicans. And so I didn't have to jump that hurdle. But so most of my friends that I assumed would just like come right on behind me, like all my childhood friends grew up the same way I did. We almost all started smoking weed around the same time. We all grew up around guns. It's like let's go. This is the guns and drugs party. And they're like, oh no, we're Republicans.
Right.
And it's like, oh, I thought we were the same here, but I guess not. And it's just that title that we have to break people out of.
That's it. Yeah.
But, so for somebody that's watching this and they're like, I'm a detail-oriented person and I'm like actually pretty good at like reaching out to people, and like everything Gabby said so far sounds like something I would love doing, but I don't know if I really should do it or like how to do it. Give me like a couple of like the key skill sets that you think somebody should definitely have before they like try to reach out and apply for a job like this.
Sure. The ability to pick up the phone and have a conversation on the phone. I know a lot of people would rather stick to email or texting, but it's important to know how to have a conversation over the phone, and willing to pick it up and dial a number and talk to someone. Because again, a lot of the times you're talking to either delegates or donors, whoever it is, media, on behalf of the candidate. So, being able to do that. You mentioned being detail oriented, being organized, know how to use the basics, Word, Excel, I think is super helpful. Within my career, I've learned how to use different databases, donor databases. So that can be helpful. I think more so if you're fundraising, but just, make sure you're keeping everything organized. Make sure like if you have reached out to a media outlet, when you reached out, how you reached out, whether it was by phone or email, and just keeping note of what you've booked, and just make sure you have a way to keep track of all of that, and then just I would reach out to someone who's running locally. It's always good to start there. If you want to start small, especially so you're not, putting too many eggs in your basket at once. Because if you want to reach out to someone who's running in your state or nationally, it's a lot. They're traveling the country or they're traveling the state. But start out locally, start out within your own county even. And I know there are county elections this year, so it's a good place to start. Or you can even start out, some of your friends. Like I said, I was working for Tony DeRazio. I was volunteering for his campaign, and he was just running for chair of LNC. And that's national, but it was a friend who I was easily able to to get my feet wet and working for a campaign. And then, like I said, then it was Larry, which is state, and now Mike, which is national. So they are different. So that's why I recommend starting small, or start just within your friend group, and whatever political party you're in, start within your friend group and work away from there.
I like it. I like that you specifically mentioned like keeping track of the results of the contacts, because that's the difference between like a lead list and a CRM. And like you can have an Excel spreadsheet that's a CRM if you're doing it correctly. I don't suggest it, but like you can. But it involves what you talked about of like keeping track of when you're reaching out to them, what they said, because you can't start from scratch every phone call, and you can't ever pass off those contacts to somebody else without that, and then they're starting from scratch. You're going to offend somebody if you don't have this stuff written down, because you can't remember it all, and they're going to be like, yeah, you told me that last phone call, we already had this conversation, and I told you no. And you're like, oh shit, right, I was supposed to think of a way to overturn that objection between these two phone calls, and I didn't, because I didn't remember what their objection was last time. So yeah, very important.
Yeah, I know, absolutely. Make sure you're taking notes. If you do have a phone call with a donor or a media outlet and they say no, make sure you write that down. If I get an email back from a media outlet and they're like, hey, either I've changed companies, I'm no longer working here, here's a new contact, you want to make that note, or no, that's not under my purview or whatever, make that note. Like, so sometimes I'll just even copy and paste that one line that they've given to me, throw it into notes. But it's good to have something. And if you're talking to a donor and they go, oh, I got that brochure or whatever, I'll check out the website, make note of that, circle back with them within like a month or two. And it does take, I've heard and I've learned that it takes 7 touches to finally get someone to give. And it could take, that many, to finally get someone to give or really want to support a campaign. But you just gotta keep at it, and definitely keep up those notes. Yeah,
persistency is definitely key for things like, especially like fundraising or like volunteer director type positions. Are you just have to hammer away at these people. Not as much with volunteer positions, because you don't want to sell somebody on volunteering, because then they're not actually going to volunteer. I've seen way too many salesmen in volunteer director positions, myself included. Like I've made that mistake a couple of times. I've had a decade of sales experience, and then like instantly got thrown into campaigns as like volunteer, because I had like middle management experience, and they were like, oh, that's the same. And it kind of is, but there's a huge difference between employees and volunteers that I did not really grasp for a few years of doing this. And it was like, because I was so used to being able to, I've always been a nice boss. But at the end of the day, if you don't listen to me, I'm going to fire you. And I've never really I've only had to do that a few times, but that threat is just lingering always in a workspace, and it's not in a volunteer position. It's like, oh, what are you going to do? Fire me? Like, I've heard that from volunteers, and it's I wish that I could. And I feel like at the end of the day, you should fire volunteers that are being shitty and like cut them off from the thing, because like a lot of those people are like attention grabbing people that will actually feel the pain of getting fired from a volunteer position anyway. But yeah, I think that it's very much important to just like continue to keep up the connection building with people and keep that going, because otherwise it's just never going to go anywhere.
No, for sure. Yeah, absolutely.
How did you get good at peopling?
That's a good question. So I think actually, like I said, having my mom as a social worker, but I don't know. I think like I said, in the beginning, being able to listen, having that ability, that is a tough skill, especially for libertarians, like we said. being able to listen, because we love to just, get it all out there. Let me give you all the issues. Let me give you, everything you should know about being a libertarian. And, just being able to sit back and say, okay, let me hear you out first, and I'll give you my points, and, go from there. But I think over time, I think, again, my career in the nonprofit, my degree, part of my degree is in communications. So I think, that's a huge help. But yeah, just over time working in the nonprofit sphere, the nonprofit world, hearing out donors with different passions um, yeah, I mean, just over time, I guess. Yeah. But I think the biggest thing, and I'm gonna say it again, is listening. That's it.
It's definitely something that takes practice. And I mean, that's kind of what I get out of the way you answered that, was just like a lot of practice. And like, a college degree is obviously extremely helpful in that, but it's I mean, it's just a part of it, right? And
right, more so experience than a degree. Yeah.
I feel like my sister's degree is actually also in communications, and so I watched her go through college. She's 5 years older than me, so I watched what that entails and thought about it for a little bit, and I actually kind of decided against it because I was like, I don't want a career in that. And all of the non-career things that she's learning, I already know. And I'm 5 years younger than her. But I was just like always the more social of the two of us. And she was like learning how to be me in college is what I felt like as a really cocky 15 or no, I would have been 13 when she was a freshman in college. And I was like, I'm already great at making friends. Well, I don't need this. And in hindsight, I actually kind of wish that I had gone into communications, because it ended up being what I did with most of my career, with stuff like that. And I would love to get more jobs in it. So yeah, if you're listening to this and you're still in high school, communications degrees are one of the more useful ones.
It's funny. My degree, actually, I started out, this is why, looking back, if I knew that trade schools were even an option, which when you're going to a public New York City high school, they don't want you going to a trade school. They want you to go, the varsity, they've got it up on their wall in the guidance counselor's office. They want you going to the best of the best because it looks good for them. And, so I went to college wanting to study drama and music because that's what I was doing in high school. I was in, the shows and whatever, and I loved it. So I was like, why not? And maybe I'll be a teacher in something, whatever. And I remember it was my first day in one of my drama classes, and the professor hands out his resume to everyone, like one of those, SAG-AFTRA, ones that you put in buckets when you go to these conventions to try to get your resume out there. He was handing them out to us with his picture on one side, his resume on the other, and he's like, 90% of you will be unemployed with this degree. And I was like, okay, maybe I don't want to do this. I was like, oh my gosh. So my fallback was journalism. And this was the age of when Twitter was getting big, and towards the end of college, when I learned that people, they always say oh, you need three news sources, three reputable news sources for a news to be true, or before you start sharing it or spreading around. And once Twitter came out, something we posted once and people would go, that's news. And I was like, I don't want to be a reporter in all of this. So interestingly enough, the way I got into doing nonprofit was I went on a birthright trip. And this is a trip for 18 to 25-year-olds. If you're Jewish and you want to learn about your Jewish heritage, you get to go to Israel for 10 days. When I came back and I learned that this trip is funded by, a little bit of the government, but mostly donors, I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, I want everyone to have this experience. And so I reached out to them, and I got a job in the IT department again. I was working the database. We were working on Salesforce. And I was working super, super behind the scenes. And I was like, no, I want to be out there. I want to be front facing. I want to be talking to the donors. And again, it just kind of went from there through different nonprofits until finally the LNC. which is in the past, which is fine. But I really enjoy, working on a campaign now, working for Mike, and I still get to be front facing and talking to people, and it's something that I'm passionate about. So it really helps, and yeah, so it just kind of went from there.
That's awesome. I've genuinely considered converting just to go on the birthright trip because I've always wanted to go to Israel.
I mean, I could tell you what to put on the application.
Tom Pinkasov and I have talked about it quite a few times.
Because they ask you questions, and they use, if you put in certain keywords, they kind of flag it. So if you say things like I've been to church or whatever, they flag those words. So if you have people who are trying to sneak in or whatever, or don't really understand the questions and they answer a certain way, they flag those, so they'll find you. But if you don't use those keywords, I don't know. No.
Right.
But it is, again, it's learning about Jewish heritage. So if you're going and you're like, oh, we're gonna go to Bethlehem, like, that's not happening.
No.
So, yeah.
That's great. I've always my mom growing up was always like very into the fact that like Judaism is the original like part, like she like we always like very vaguely celebrated like a couple of the more popular Jewish holidays and stuff like that, and she was very into that. And I always used to make fun of her, and then I got a career in finance, and like everyone that I was working around was Jewish, and we got like all the Jewish holidays off and everything, and I started learning like Yiddish just because I wanted to know whether or not my boss was cursing at me like to my coworkers, or if he was talking nicely about me. And now I'm like actually have like a lot more appreciation for the culture than I did as a kid. But it's interesting that you mentioned kind of like a path down into what you're doing, and that it really just kind of started from, you were a people person that got passionate about things and like wanted to fight for those things. And that's, I think I think a lot of people just haven't found a thing to be passionate about yet. And they're not able to really put that kind of drive into something because it just doesn't really exist. They're just kind of still running that rat race that their guidance counselor started them off on, of like just trying to get the best resume and the best thing. And like that's I don't know. I've not that old yet, so I don't want to talk like some like wise old sage, but like I've definitely tried to work for resume points before, and it was not the move. But
I think, and it's kind of going back to that, I love what you do and, work a day in your life thing, which is something my other grandma, my dad's mom, used to always say. And it's so funny because I used to quote her. Of course, it's not her quote, but I'd be like, my grandma used to say, quote, but there is something to be said about finding something that you're passionate about. True, though, if it becomes a job, you could lose that passion because it's become work now. It's no longer a hobby. And like for me, like my hobby, which almost became a career path for me, kind of, it was meteorology. Like I love tracking hurricanes, which now we live in Florida, so I'm really excited about that. But it was something where I was like, maybe I'll go into that. But once it started becoming more work, and I was actually like, I took a class here and there in college, I was like, I'd rather just, do it on my own time and do it as a hobby. But if you're able to hold that passion every day, and you, in the end, at the end of that, 9 to 5 day or whatever it is, and you go, you know what, I can wake up and do this again tomorrow, it's going to be okay. So I think that's a big part of it.
I think you're the only person I've ever met that moved to Florida, like thinking the hurricanes there was a positive like selling point to going to Florida.
I know. It's really bad. No, I saw something the other day. It was something like Floridians are more concerned about love bug season than hurricane season, and that's all you have to know about living in Florida, or something like that. So love bugs are these little bugs that like they stain cars. They can like get, they stain the cars so that even that the paint comes off. It's like, it's really bad. I mean, mostly everyone here has garages, so it's not a big worry, but if you're going for a long drive and you'll see like the stains from these love bugs. It's only around like April, May, and then they die. Kind of like cicada season in like Maryland and those areas. That's like insane. I've driven through that. But no, hurricanes, it's honestly, it's like a blizzard in New York. They're prepared. They've got, this snow plows going. And here it's just, you put up your shutters, and it's usually not as bad as the media portrays it to be. It's usually just some wind and rain, unless you're like in direct hit of the hurricane. For example, there was that hurricane that was originally heading towards Tampa, but it shifted last minute and hit Fort Myers. Fort Myers got seriously hit, but here we're like, actually don't know, it's like 50, 100 miles north of Fort Myers, whatever it is. My aunt and uncle who live here, they lost like a solar panel, and that's it. It could make that much of a difference. So, I compare it to like a blizzard, or even a bad nor'easter that New York gets those sometimes. But yeah, we'll see. We're heading towards hurricane season, so we'll see.
Well, good luck on that.
Thanks.
Yeah, I definitely can relate to what you were saying with the kind of losing of the passion, because I did that with cooking. I was like, I love to cook. I've always loved to cook. And then I was like, let me go to culinary school. That makes sense. And I made a very big mistake of going to culinary school and getting a job at a restaurant at the same time. And I was a busboy, so I wasn't like in the kitchen, but I was still in and out of the kitchen. And it got to the point where like ramen was too much work when I got home at the end of the day, because it's just like, I don't even want to look at a pot or a pan or a stove. And I was like eating Pop-Tarts for dinner consistently, and like I would make a good breakfast because I was fine in the morning, but then like by the end of the day I was like, so it was a very reversed diet that ended up being fine. But I just completely like hated cooking towards the end of it, and I was like, I can't do this anymore. And like thankfully I got out of it in time to where I didn't like, I still love it as a hobby, but I will never pretend that I want to be like a chef and do that for 10 hours a day. Man. It's just like, it's not the same. Like doing it for somebody else is a lot different than doing it for yourself.
That is a good point. Yeah. And interestingly enough, just piggybacking right off of that, fundraising is, in a way, you're kind of doing it for yourself. And, I would say, when you're picking up a phone and someone says yes to you, yes to donating, it's a really great feeling. It's an even better feeling when they're donating to something that, again, that you're passionate about and you feel good about. So it is true. If you're doing for something else, you're doing it for a cause, you're like, whatever. It's definitely different than doing for something that you've put your all already into, that someone is giving back to. Yeah. So, which, by the way, I don't know, just going off of your job at the restaurant, you might appreciate that movie Waiting, I think it's called. Check it out. Yeah. It's a movie that my husband Eric showed me, and it's really good. It really makes you appreciate people who work at restaurants. So check that out.
I'll definitely try to do that. Yeah, I feel like for me, one of the things that I like the fact that most of the time I'm not fundraising for myself, because I hate fundraising for myself. But I relate. I get what you're saying, and it's definitely true. But sometimes the like separation of it, you're not asking, please give me money. It's like, please give this thing I care about money. Yes. It's a lot easier, at least for me personally.
No, for sure. Because again, and fundraising, it's sales. You're selling yourself first, and then you're selling the product or the cause or whatever it is. So it's making sure that you can get on the phone or have that initial conversation, and then once the person is like, oh, let me hear you out, then you can talk about whatever it is that you're actually selling or fundraising for.
Right. So before we wrap up, I want to give you a chance to tell people how to find or donate and get involved with Mike's campaign, and then like how to get involved with other campaigns if there's anything else.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, people, you're always welcome to email me. My email address for Mike's campaign, but really, email me if you have any questions, you want to know more about, fundraising or campaign work or anything. You can email me at gabrielle@miketermott.com. That's GABRIELLE. I'm not sure if it's right there. Yeah. And Mike Termott, that's MAAT, not MATT. So yeah, feel free to shoot me an email, and you can go to Mike's website. That's miketermott.com. Read his platform and everything. He's got some real solutions. If you go to goldnewdeal.org. And yeah, and if you liked what you see, please support the campaign. You can go to miketermott.com/donate. Feel free to have a conversation with me first if you have any questions about his campaign or you'd like to get involved. I'm happy to answer them and answer any questions and hear you out.
Awesome. Yeah, guys, definitely go check out all of those things that she said. The Gold New Deal is actually like one of the better like policy platform like put together that I've seen from any of the candidates in recent memory. So like I like the fact that it's on a different website too and has like kind of its own brand thing. That part's really fun. But yeah, if you go to lp.org/candidates, you can find a list of every candidate that at least the LNZ knows about right there, and find one near you. Like Gabby said, find something local that is like super doable. It's a lot easier to run a town council candidates calendar than it is to run like a presidential candidates calendar. So start local. But thank you so much for watching, and definitely come back next week. We have the Bootleg Libertarian coming on to talk about what they're doing in Tennessee. And then I mentioned it a little bit earlier. On the 30th, we're doing a Fight Club with, so far, there are 4 confirmed and a maybe presidential candidates for 2024. So come on back, check that out. Gabby, thank you so much for coming on. This was great.
Thank you, David. Yeah, this was fun. Thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. Again, thanks for watching, and until next time, keep up the fight.